stocked with supplies. That's when I saw her, Penelope, crumpled against the far wall, her uniform soaked through with sweat, hair plastered to her forehead. "Penny?" I whispered, rushing toward her. Her eyes fluttered open, cracked lips parting. "Vera?" Her voice was a dry rasp. "Water, please." The digital thermometer on the wall read 104 degrees Fahrenheit. In July, with no ventilation, the storage room had become an oven. I touched her arm. Her skin burned against my fingertips. "How long have you been in here?" I asked, already pulling my water bottle from my bag. She gulped greedily, water spilling down her chin. "Since yesterday afternoon, after the meeting." My stomach clenched. 17 hours trapped in sweltering heat. "I found something," she whispered, eyes darting to the door. "In the safety reports." When I showed Kent Alvarez, regional manager, the man who'd given me a final warning last week for questioning overtime policies. He told me to double-check some inventory. She continued, said he'd be right back. Then, click. Her fingers weakly mimicked a key turning. I screamed until my voice gave out. I helped her stand, her legs buckling beneath her. The guard wouldn't arrive for another hour. Management had implemented a strict policy. No unauthorized personnel in office areas outside working hours. Penny had been invisible, trapped, while the cleaning crew vacuumed just yards away. "We need to get you to a doctor," I said, supporting her weight. She clutched my arm, nails digging in. "The reports. They're falsifying safety checks, Vera. Equipment that failed inspection. They're still using it. Someone's going to get hurt." As we stumbled toward the exit, Penny suddenly froze. Through the glass panel in the door, I could see Kent walking across the parking lot, 40 minutes earlier than his usual arrival. His face, when he spotted us through the window, first shock, then something darker flickering across his features, told me everything. He knew exactly what he'd done, and he'd done it on purpose. I wonder if you've ever seen someone's mask slip. That moment when the person you thought you knew reveals something monstrous underneath? If you have, let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear how this nightmare at work ended, make sure you're subscribed and hit that like button. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. My name is Vera Tennyson, 32 years old, 5 years at Woodland Manufacturing, and until that morning, I believed hard work and honesty were enough to succeed. I was raised by my grandmother after my parents died in a car accident when I was 7. Grandma Rose taught kindergarten for 40 years and raised me with simple values: tell the truth, help others, and stand up for what's right. I started in packaging and worked my way up to quality control supervisor. Not glamorous, but it paid the bills for my small apartment and kept me close to my grandmother as her health declined. Woodland made industrial water pumps, critical equipment for cities across the Midwest. Our products had to be flawless. Penny and I weren't close friends, just workplace allies. She'd transferred from the Eastern Branch 6 months earlier, brilliant, detail-oriented, and refreshingly straightforward. While other coworkers avoided management scrutiny by keeping their heads down, Penny asked questions. She studied manuals, memorized safety protocols, and suggested improvements. Management hated her for it. "They're waiting for me to quit," she'd told me during lunch break 3 weeks before the incident. "But my son starts college next year. I need this job." I remember thinking she was paranoid, until that morning when I found her locked in what could have become her tomb. Kent's face hardened as he strode through the door. All business now, the momentary shock replaced with controlled anger. "What are you doing here so early, Vera? And why is Penelope out of the storage area?" The casualness of his question made my skin crawl. "She was locked in overnight," I said, still supporting Penny's weight. "The temperature's over 100 degrees in there. She needs medical attention." Kent straightened his tie. "There must be some misunderstanding. Penelope was assigned inventory duty. The door doesn't lock from the outside." Penny's fingers dug into my arm. "You locked me in," she whispered. "You knew what you were doing." "That's a serious accusation," Kent said, his voice dangerously soft. "One that could have consequences. For both of you." 2 other employees arrived then, stopping short at the scene before them. Kent's demeanor shifted instantly. "Penelope isn't feeling well," he announced loudly. "Vera, Please take her to urgent care. Company policy requires an incident report. I'll have it ready when you return. I helped Penny to my car, the weight of Kent's stare burning into my back. The urgent care doctor didn't bother hiding his concern. Severe dehydration, heat exhaustion that could have progressed to heat stroke. Another few hours. He shook his head. How exactly did this happen? While Penny received IV fluids, I called her son, Drake, a high school senior with his mother's serious eyes. When he arrived, his face crumpled at the sight of his mother in a hospital bed. Mom works so hard, he told me in the hallway. Since Dad left, it's been just us. She takes every overtime shift they offer. When Penny was stable enough to talk, she told us everything. The irregularities she'd found in the safety inspection reports. Equipment that had failed critical tests but received passing marks. Maintenance schedules altered. Her meeting with Kent where he'd suggested she was confused about the regulations. He knew exactly what he was doing, she said, voice stronger now. Putting me in that room was a message. We need to report this, I insisted. Penny's laugh was bitter. To who? Regional Director Preston is Kent's brother-in-law. HR reports directly to them. The last person who filed a complaint was transferred to night shift until they quit. Drake took his mother's hand. Mom, you can't go back there. Her eyes met mine, and I saw the decision form. I won't. We returned to Woodland that afternoon with resignation letters. Kent accepted them with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. Unfortunate you both feel this way, he said smoothly. But perhaps it's for the best. Small towns have small memories, but word does travel about. Difficult employees. As we walked to our cars for the last time, Penny turned to me. Thank you. If you hadn't come in early today, don't. I cut her off, unable to contemplate the alternative. What will you do now? She asked. I hadn't thought that far ahead. My grandmother needed her medications. I had rent due in 2 weeks. I'll find something, I said with more confidence than I felt. Kent's parting threat proved prophetic. Within days, the rejections began. Positions I was qualified for suddenly filled before interviews. Applications mysteriously lost. One potential employer actually winced when he saw my resume. You worked at Woodland? He asked, already closing my file. Penny faced similar obstacles. After 3 weeks of rejections, she and Drake moved in with her sister 2 states away. It's not right, she told me during our goodbye call. They're going to hurt someone, Vera. Those pumps go into hospitals, nursing homes, schools. I'd been living on ramen and picking up delivery gigs to make rent. Grandma Rose had raised me to believe in justice, but justice seemed in short supply. What can we do? I asked. No one will listen. Someone will, Penny replied. We just need to make them hear us. After we hung up, I sat in my darkening apartment, fury building inside me. Kent and the others had calculated exactly how much power they held in our small town. They'd weaponized our need for jobs, our community connections, our limited options, and they'd nearly killed Penny to silence her. That night, I made a decision. If they wanted to play with people's lives, they'd learn that some people fight back. I opened my laptop and began to research. The annual Midwest Industrial Safety Conference was 6 weeks away. Woodland Manufacturing would host the event, showcasing their commitment to safety with state inspectors, industry leaders, and regulators in attendance. Kent was scheduled as the keynote speaker. I picked up my phone and called the one person who had as much reason to hate Kent as I did. Penny, I have an idea, but I'll need your help, and we'll need others. For the first time since finding her in that storage room, I felt something beyond anger and helplessness. I felt purpose. What I didn't know then was how many others had suffered under Woodland's management, or how far Kent would go to protect himself, or that our plan would spiral into something far bigger and more dangerous than we'd imagined. I also didn't know that someone inside Woodland was watching our every move, ready to destroy us before we could expose the truth. The first hint that we weren't alone in our fight came 3 days later. I was delivering pizzas, my 3rd shift that week, when the customer opened her door and gasped, "You're Vera Tennyson," she said, eyes wide. I nodded warily, used to small-town recognition, but suspicious now. I'm Zola. I worked at Woodland for 8 years. Accounting department. She glanced over her shoulder before pulling me inside. You need to know something. You and Penelope weren't the first. In her kitchen, Zola showed me a notebook filled with dates, names, and incidents. I started keeping track 3 years ago, after the acquisition. I scanned the pages, ice spreading through my veins. 13 employees who'd raised safety concerns, all systematically isolated, harassed, or placed in dangerous situations until they quit. One had suffered chemical burns in a storage accident remarkably similar to Penny's. Why didn't anyone report this? I asked. Zola's smile was sad. To who? The local paper's owner plays golf with Preston. The county inspector's daughter got a management position at Woodland right out of college. They've built their fortress carefully. Why are you showing me this? Because you're still fighting, she said simply. And you're not the only one. We've been waiting for the right moment. My phone chimed with another delivery reminder. As I stood to leave, Zola pressed a flash drive into my hand. Financial records, she whispered. Where the money's really going instead of equipment maintenance. Be careful who sees this. As I drove to my next delivery, my mind raced. We weren't just seeking justice for Penny anymore. This was bigger, more dangerous, and suddenly more possible than I'd imagined. I called Penny that night. We're gonna need more help, I told her, and I think I know where to find it. Over the next 2 weeks, our small resistance grew. Zola connected us with former employees scattered across 3 counties. Each had a story, each had evidence, each had been silenced, until now. Theo from maintenance, who'd been ordered to bypass safety valves on industrial equipment. Imani from shipping, who'd documented mishandled hazardous materials. Reese from testing, who'd kept copies of altered inspection reports. But the most valuable alliance came from someone still inside Woodland, Kit, a janitor who'd worked there for 20 years, invisible to management but with access to every room, every conversation. They're panicking about the conference. Kit told me during our clandestine meeting at a truck stop 50 miles from town. State inspectors are coming, industry bigwigs. They've got crews working overtime to create a Potemkin village. Kit slid a security badge across the table. This will get you into any room except executive offices, and I've mapped the camera blind spots. Our plan took shape. Document everything, gather witnesses, and create a moment so public that Woodland couldn't silence it. The safety conference would be their unveiling, just not the one they planned. But even as our network grew, so did the pressure. My grandmother's nursing home called about a payment issue. Her insurance had mysteriously denied coverage. My landlord received complaints about late-night business activities from my apartment. My car developed brake problems no mechanic could explain. Then came the warning. I returned from a delivery shift to find my apartment door slightly ajar. Nothing was taken, but my research was neatly stacked on the kitchen table. Research I'd kept only on a password-protected laptop. On top lay a note. Some fires burn those who start them. That night, huddled in a motel room I couldn't afford, I called Penny. They know, I whispered. They're watching us. Her voice was steady. Then we accelerate. The conference is in 10 days. We move now. It's too dangerous, I argued. They already tried to kill me, Vera, she interrupted. What more can they take? My career's gone. I'm living on my sister's couch. My son had to delay college. Her voice hardened. What about the next person they decide is a problem? Or the family whose home floods because of a faulty pump? How many people have to suffer before we stop them? I thought of Grandma Rose, who'd faced down school boards and angry parents to protect her students, who'd taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but action despite it. Okay, I said finally, but we need to be smarter than they are. What we didn't realize was that Kent had already set his own counterplan in motion. One designed not just to discredit us, but to eliminate any threat permanently. The chess game had begun, and unlike Kent, we couldn't afford to sacrifice any pieces. 8 days before the conference, our first major obstacle emerged. Kit called me at 3 a.m., voice tight with panic. They're installing new security systems, keycard access to every external door, biometric scanners for sensitive areas. And they've hired external security for the conference, not the usual rent-a-cops. These guys look military. I paced my motel room, heart hammering. Can you get me the specifications? Already working on it. But there's more. They're doing background checks on all conference attendees. Anyone with Woodland connections in the last 5 years is being flagged. Our original plan, having our witnesses attend as industry representatives, was disintegrating. We'll adapt, I said, projecting confidence I didn't feel. Keep your head down, don't risk your position. After hanging up, I stared at the wall where I'd taped our timeline. Red markers slashed through each passing day, counting down to the conference. Our window was narrowing. I called an emergency meeting at Zola's cabin outside town, the only place we could gather without surveillance. 14 former employees crammed into her living room, faces drawn with exhaustion and worry. Theo, a burly maintenance worker with calloused hands, spoke first. My cousin works for the security company they hired. These guys don't mess around. If we try to force our way in, we won't, I interrupted. We'll be smarter. Imani leaned forward, her braids swinging. I've been monitoring their conference preparations. They're transforming the place, fresh paint, new equipment, temporary walls hiding the problematic areas. The presentation will showcase their state-of-the-art safety protocols. Reese, a former testing specialist, snorted. Safety protocols they've never actually implemented. What about the evidence? I asked Zola. The financial records? The falsified reports? Compiled and ready, she confirmed, but without access to the conference. The room fell silent. Weeks of planning, evidence gathering, and risk-taking, all potentially wasted. Then Penny spoke from the video call on my laptop. She couldn't risk returning to town, but her voice filled the room. What's the one thing they can't control on conference day? We looked at each other blankly. The weather, she said simply. Outside, thunder rumbled as if on cue. July in the Midwest meant scorching temperatures, but also violent storms that could arise without warning. The building's climate control, I said slowly, understanding dawning. If it failed during the conference. Theo's eyes widened. The backup generators only cover emergency lighting and critical operations, not air conditioning. With outdoor temperatures forecasted at 95 degrees that day, Penny continued, and hundreds of bodies in an enclosed space. The temperature would soar, Reese finished, just like that storage room. A plan began forming, elegant in its simplicity, devastating in its symbolism. Make them feel what Penny felt. Create conditions they couldn't ignore or control. They hurt people by making them invisible, I said quietly. We'll make the invisible impossible to ignore. For the first time since we started, I saw genuine hope in their faces. But as we dispersed that night, none of us noticed the dark sedan parked half a mile down the road, its occupant speaking quietly into a phone. The next morning, I woke to frantic knocking. Reese stood at my motel door, face ashen. They got Kit, he said. Anonymous tip about stolen company property. Police searched his apartment this morning. My blood turned to ice. Did they find anything? No, Kit's too smart. But they fired him on the spot. And the message is clear. They're picking us off one by one. The loss of our inside connection was devastating. Without Kit, we had no eyes inside Woodland, no access to secure areas. Worse, Kent now knew exactly who was helping us. That afternoon, my grandmother called from the nursing home, her voice weak and confused. Vera, the nurse says I'm being transferred to a different facility. Tomorrow. Transferred to where? Someplace 3 hours away. They say my insurance changed. Pure rage flooded my system. They were targeting my grandmother, a frail 84-year-old woman, to get to me. I called the nursing home administrator, who apologetically confirmed the transfer. The authorization came directly from her insurance provider. Nothing we can do. The insurance company stonewalled me with bureaucratic excuses. By evening, I was sitting in my car outside Woodland Manufacturing, watching employees leave for the day, wondering which window belonged to Kent's office. My phone rang. Zola, don't do anything stupid, she said without preamble. We've got another way. They're going after my grandmother. I hissed. I know, and we'll fix it. But not by confronting Kent directly. That's exactly what he wants. You losing control, making threats he can use against you. She was right. But the knowledge did nothing to cool my rage. Come to my place, she insisted. Now. At Zola's cabin, I found Imani huddled over a laptop with a young man I didn't recognize. This is my brother, Leo, Imani explained. He works in health insurance software, and he has interesting news about your grandmother's policy change. However, Leo adjusted his glasses. The transfer authorization didn't come through normal channels. Someone accessed the system using administrative credentials and manually flagged her file. Can you reverse it? I asked. Already done, he said with a tight smile. And I've locked it from further changes while making it look like a system error. Your grandmother stays where she is. Relief washed over me, followed immediately by fresh worry. They'll just try something else. Which is why we're moving up our timeline, Zola said. The conference is 6 days away, but we make our move tomorrow. Tomorrow? I echoed. We're not ready. We don't have a choice, Imani said softly. Kent's not just trying to stop us now. He's sending a message about what happens to people who challenge him. And we need to send our own message, Zola added, starting with the most important piece of our plan. She handed me a sealed envelope. Your grandmother's transfer might have been stopped, but others won't be so lucky. Inside is a bus ticket to Millridge, 3 hours away. Someone's waiting to meet you there. Who? Someone who can finally make people listen. The bus arrived in Millridge just after noon the next day. Standing at the terminal, checking faces against the photograph Zola had given me, I finally spotted her, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Helen Braddock, she said, extending her hand. State Labor Department. My heart skipped. You're the one person in the regulatory system Kent Alvarez can't control or intimidate. She finished. I've been building a case against Woodland for 18 months. What I lack is first-hand witnesses willing to go on record. In a small cafe, I laid out everything. Penny's imprisonment, the falsified safety reports, the systematic elimination of whistleblowers, the defective equipment being shipped to hospitals and schools. Helen listened without interruption, taking meticulous notes. This matches my findings, she said finally. But testimony isn't enough. We need irrefutable evidence. We have documents, I said. Financial records showing money diverted from safety upgrades, altered inspection reports. And how did you obtain these documents? She asked pointedly. I hesitated, understanding the problem. Evidence gathered illegally might be inadmissible. I thought so, Helen said. Here's the reality. I can open a formal investigation, but Woodland will have time to cover their tracks. Their lawyers will tie us up for years while they continue operating. My heart sank. So we've risked everything for nothing? I didn't say that. A hint of steel entered her voice. The safety conference creates a unique opportunity. If violations were observed by outside witnesses, particularly state inspectors already present for the conference, that would change everything. The inspectors will only see what Woodland wants them to see, I argued. They've transformed the facility. Unless something forced them to look deeper. Helen leaned forward. Tell me about this plan your group has developed. I hesitated, then decided to trust her. I outlined our strategy to disable the climate control during the conference, forcing attendees to experience conditions similar to what Penny endured. Helen nodded slowly. Symbolic, but potentially effective. However, there's a missing piece. You need to ensure the right people see the right evidence at the right moment. How do we do that without access to the conference? That, Helen said with the first smile I'd seen from her, is where I come in. She slid a conference badge across the table. Chief Inspector, State Industrial Safety Board. I was already attending. Now, I'll be your eyes inside. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of genuine hope. There's something else you should know, Helen added, her expression darkening. Kent Alvarez isn't just creating hostile working conditions. The pumps Woodland manufactures are showing failure rates far above industry standards. 3 hospitals have reported emergency generator flooding from faulty pumps in the past year. The implications hit me like a physical blow. People could die. People already have, Helen corrected grimly. A nursing home in Laketon lost power during a heat wave when their backup generators flooded. 2 residents died before evacuation. I thought of my grandmother, of Penny trapped in that sweltering room. We're not just fighting for justice anymore, I whispered. We're preventing more deaths. Exactly. Helen gathered her notes. Your group has created the perfect opportunity. Now we need to ensure it exposes the full scope of what's happening at Woodland. As we parted, Helen gripped my arm. Be careful, Vera. Kent Alvarez has powerful friends and few scruples. This will get worse before it gets better. I had no idea how prophetic those words would prove. 3 days before the conference, disaster struck. Theo, our maintenance expert who would disable the climate controls, didn't show for our final planning meeting. Calls went straight to voicemail. When Reese drove past his house, police cars filled the driveway. Manufacturing meth, Imani reported after making calls to contacts in law enforcement. They found a lab in his garage. That's impossible, I exploded. Theo wouldn't. Of course he wouldn't, Zola interrupted. But evidence can be planted, and Theo has a decade-old possession charge that makes the accusation sticky enough to hold him. Our plan was unraveling. Without Theo's expertise, the climate control sabotage, the centerpiece of our strategy, was in jeopardy. I can do it, Reese offered. Theo showed me the basics. Too risky, I countered. You don't have his experience. What choice do we have? Imani demanded. The conference is 3 days away. We've lost Kit and Theo. Kent is picking us off systematically. That night, alone in my motel room, I called Penny. Maybe we should stop, I said, exhaustion seeping into my voice. They're always one step ahead. Someone could get seriously hurt. Penny was silent so long I thought we'd lost connection. Do you remember what the doctor said? She finally asked. About what would have happened if you hadn't found me? Yes. I keep thinking about that. How close I came to dying in that room. How Drake would have gotten a call that his mother was found dead at work. How Kent would have manufactured some explanation. Her voice hardened. And I think about the next person who questions their practices, and the people using those faulty pumps. She was right. The cost of failure wasn't just our justice. It was future victims. We continue, I said with renewed resolve. But we need to change tactics. They're expecting us to target the conference from inside, so we work from outside. In the new plan that emerged, we wouldn't need access to the building's systems at all. Nature would do that for us. The weather forecast for conference day showed temperatures nearing 100 degrees with high humidity, dangerous heat by any standard. All we needed was to ensure the building's cooling systems failed at the right moment. The main transformer, Reese explained over a secure call. It's external to the building, feeds power to the cooling towers. If it overheated at peak load, how? I asked. Reflective panels, he said, positioned to focus additional solar heat on the transformer housing. With the system already straining against record temperatures, it wouldn't take much to push it over the edge. It was elegant, required no internal access, and couldn't be traced to sabotage. Just unfortunate positioning of temporary structures for the conference. But Kent wasn't finished with us yet. The morning before the conference, I woke to pounding on my door. Not police this time. Drake, Penny's son. Eyes wild with panic. Mom's been arrested, he gasped. Identity theft charges. They're saying she stole patient data from her last job before Woodland. Kent had played his trump card. With Penny in custody, the heart would go out of our resistance. Many might back out entirely. Drake handed me his phone with a text from Penny. Continue no matter what. This ends tomorrow. Conference day dawned scorching hot, the sun already brutal at 7 a.m. Our remaining team gathered at our staging point, a park overlooking Woodland Manufacturing. Through binoculars, we could see attendees arriving, security checking credentials at every entrance. Everyone clear on their roles? I asked. Nods all around, faces grim but determined. Helen's inside, Zola confirmed. Positioned near the main conference hall with full access to the executive presentation room. Reese? He patted his bag. Reflective panels ready. I can place them without being seen from the security perimeter. Imani? Media contacts on standby. One call brings 3 news crews. And the evidence packets? Prepared and positioned. Zola confirmed. Ready for distribution the moment conditions are right. As they dispersed to their positions, I felt a strange calm settle over me. After weeks of reactive scrambling, we were finally taking the initiative. I checked my watch. 8:30 a.m. Kent would be welcoming attendees now, all corporate smiles and rehearsed warmth. By noon, the outdoor temperature would hit 97 degrees. By 1 p.m., when Kent was scheduled to present Woodland's industry-leading safety protocols, the building's interior would become unbearable. What Kent didn't know, what none of them knew, was that we weren't just creating discomfort, we were creating understanding. Sometimes, to make people care about invisible suffering, you have to make that suffering visible, and by day's end, no one would be able to look away. I positioned myself on the hill overlooking Woodland Manufacturing's main entrance, close enough to monitor the situation but far enough to avoid security. Through binoculars, I watched attendees filing into the gleaming glass building. Men and women in suits, carrying briefcases and conference folders, completely unaware they were walking into our carefully orchestrated revelation. My earpiece crackled. Reflective panels in position, Reese reported, angled perfectly. With this sun, the transformer should hit critical temperature around 12:30. Helen's in position, Zola added. Kent just welcomed everyone to the main hall. She says it's packed. Every state regulator and industry leader within 300 miles. I checked the outdoor temperature display on a nearby bank. 91 degrees Fahrenheit at 9:15 in the morning. The forecast promised at least 6 more degrees by midday. Any word on Penny? I asked. Her attorney is working on bail, Drake replied, his voice tight with worry. The charges are paper thin, but they're keeping her in holding until after the conference. Of course they were. Kent had planned this meticulously, removing our most compelling witness before his moment in the spotlight. What he hadn't counted on was our contingency planning. By 11 a.m., the conference was in full swing. Presentations on industry standards, vendor displays of safety equipment, networking over coffee and pastries. All in climate-controlled comfort while Kent worked the room, shaking hands, playing the role of safety advocate. At 11:47, Reese's voice came through my earpiece. Transformer temperature rising faster than expected. This heat is unreal. I scanned the cloudless sky. The summer sun beat down mercilessly, the kind of heat that shimmers above asphalt and makes breathing feel like work. How long? I asked. 20 minutes, maybe less. I relayed this to our team members stationed around the perimeter. Everyone ready? Affirmations came through one by one. We'd positioned our people at every exit, ready to guide conference attendees to our evidence station once the inevitable evacuation began. At 12:09 it happened. The main transformer made a sound like distant thunder, then went silent. Immediately, the building's emergency lights flickered on, but as predicted, the climate control system shut down completely. Through my binoculars, I watched confusion spread through the lobby. Security personnel rushed outside to check the transformer, finding nothing more suspicious than sun-baked equipment on the hottest day of summer. Helen reports the temperature is already climbing in the main hall, Zola said. Kent is assuring everyone they'll have power restored momentarily. Now came the waiting game. Inside that building, hundreds of professionals in business attire were about to experience what Penny had endured for 17 hours. The difference? They could leave any time. She couldn't. By 12:45, we could see people loosening ties, removing jackets. Windows were opened, but the breezeless day offered no relief. Staff distributed water bottles, but supplies quickly dwindled. Interior temperature has hit 85 degrees, Helen reported through Zola. Kent's insisting they continue with the program. He doesn't want to postpone his keynote. Of course he didn't. The keynote was his crowning achievement, ICC, proof of his leadership to industry peers and superiors. He'd sacrifice comfort rather than surrender his moment. By 1:15, the situation inside deteriorated rapidly. Through binoculars, I watched red-faced attendees fanning themselves with programs. Kent took the stage, sweat darkening his shirt, still smiling that plastic smile. Helen says it's 91 degrees inside now, Zola reported. Someone just asked to move the presentation outside. Kent refused. I checked the outdoor temperature, 98 Fahrenheit. Inside that sealed building, with hundreds of bodies generating additional heat, conditions were becoming dangerous. At 1:32, the first person collapsed. an elderly inspector overcome by heat. Medical personnel rushed forward, but in the crowded, overheated room, they struggled to reach him. Now, I said into my communicator, Imani, call your media contacts. Everyone else to positions. Kent tried maintaining control, directing attendees to remain seated, promising the power would return any moment. But as a second person showed signs of heat distress, the exodus began. Security couldn't contain it. Hundreds of overheated professionals streaming toward exits, seeking relief. As they emerged into the scorching parking lot, our team members were waiting, not with protests or accusations, but with cold water, portable fans, and simple directions. Relief stations set up in the shade across the street. Under canopies in the park opposite Woodland, we'd arranged water stations, seating, and large fans powered by portable generators. Immediate relief from the sweltering conditions. And beside each station, documentation tables. As the conference attendees gratefully accepted water and cooling, they found themselves surrounded by evidence of Woodland's malfeasance, testimony transcripts, financial records showing diverted safety funds, photographs of defective equipment installed in hospitals and schools, medical reports from injured employees, and most damning of all, a large display showing Penny's medical records from the day I found her, alongside the storage room temperature logs and security footage showing Kent locking the door. Helen Braddock moved through the crowd, no longer just an observer but directing state inspectors to specific evidence. Media vans pulled up, cameras capturing the scene of disheveled industry leaders and regulators, reviewing damning documentation, while Woodland executives watched helplessly from across the street. Through my binoculars, I found Kent standing at the building entrance, face contorted with fury as he realized what was happening. When he spotted news cameras, he retreated inside. He's running, I said into my communicator, probably heading for his office to destroy records. No, he's not. Helen's voice came through clearly now. I've got state police securing all executive offices. No one enters until we complete our inspection. The temperature continued climbing. By 2 p.m., the outdoor thermometer read 99 Fahrenheit. Inside Woodland's main hall, where some attendees and staff remained, temperatures approached 105 Fahrenheit. Almost exactly what Penny had endured. That's when we unveiled our final element. A large screen activated at our relief station, showing a pre-recorded video of Penny, calm, professional, sitting at a desk with documents visible. My name is Penelope Merritt, her voice rang out over the crowd. Until recently, I was a quality control specialist at Woodland Manufacturing. What you're experiencing today, this heat, this discomfort, is what I endured for 17 hours after discovering falsified safety reports. The crowd fell silent. Water bottles paused midway to lips, all eyes on the screen. Woodland Manufacturing has systematically endangered lives by cutting safety measures and silencing employees who speak up, Penny continued. The equipment they produce protects critical infrastructure, hospitals, nursing homes, schools. When it fails, people die. She held up documents, explaining each one in clear, precise language, the technical violations, the covered-up failures, the retribution against whistleblowers. The temperature you're feeling right now, she concluded, is the same temperature I was locked in for discovering these violations. The difference? You can leave. I couldn't. And the people depending on Woodland's equipment can't escape the consequences of their negligence either. As her video ended, the real power of our plan became evident. We hadn't just created discomfort, we'd created understanding. Every person there had physically experienced a fraction of what Penny endured. The heat had made abstract concerns visceral and immediate. Across the street, Woodland executives huddled in panicked conversation. Several state inspectors were already entering the building, Helen Braddock directing them to specific areas we'd identified. My earpiece crackled. Vera, you need to see this. I turned my binoculars toward the main entrance. A police car had pulled up, and officers were escorting someone inside, not taking someone away, bringing someone in. My heart leaped. Penny. Her attorney had secured her release. Let's finish this, I said, descending from my observation point. By the time I crossed to our relief station, The scene had transformed. What began as a simple cooling area was now an impromptu investigation headquarters. State officials interviewed former employees. Inspectors examined documentation. Reporters captured it all. I found Zola directing people to specific evidence stations. The Industrial Safety Board just declared an emergency suspension of operations. She told me, eyes bright with vindication. Helen fast-tracked it. Woodland is shut down pending full investigation. Kent? Barricaded in his office, refusing to come out. As if summoned by his name, a commotion erupted at the building entrance. Kent emerged, flanked by security, attempting to push through to his car. His face was flushed, tie askew, the composed executive persona completely shattered. He froze when he saw the media. Then his eyes found me in the crowd. For a moment, we simply stared at each other across the distance. His expressions cycled through shock, rage, and finally, fear. That's when Penny stepped into his path. The parking lot fell silent. Here was the woman from the video, the one whose suffering they'd just symbolically shared, standing face to face with the man responsible. Kent recovered quickly, corporate mask sliding back into place. Penelope, I see the misunderstanding about your identity theft charges has been cleared up. No misunderstanding, Kent, she replied, voice carrying in the sudden quiet. Just one more attempt to silence someone who knew too much. These accusations are groundless, he said loudly, aware of the cameras now trained on him. Woodland Manufacturing has an exemplary safety record. It's 105 degrees in your conference hall right now. Penny interrupted. Exactly the temperature you locked me in for 17 hours. How does it feel, Kent? Unbearable after just 3 hours, isn't it? His composure cracked. I never locked you anywhere. You're making accusations without proof. We have the security footage, Helen Braddock said, stepping forward, and sworn statements from 15 former employees documenting systematic safety violations and retribution against whistleblowers. Kent's eyes darted around, looking for allies, finding none. Even his own security staff had stepped back, creating distance. My attorney will. Your attorney will be very busy, Helen cut in. The state has opened a criminal investigation into willful negligence resulting in death. Those nursing home residents who died when your faulty pumps failed? We have the inspection records showing you shipped that equipment despite failed safety tests. The color drained from Kent's face. This was no longer about workplace harassment or corporate misconduct. This was manslaughter. As state police officers approached him, Kent made one last desperate attempt. This was a setup. They sabotaged the power to create this situation. Helen stepped closer. The transformer overheated due to record temperatures and poor maintenance. Another safety violation we've documented. Your own staff confirmed the maintenance schedule was altered to cut costs. I watched as Kent was escorted to a police car, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him. Not with dramatic confrontations or violent retribution, but with something far more powerful. Hafen, the simple, irrefutable exposure of truth. In the days that followed, the full impact of our action unfolded like a wave spreading outward. State investigators uncovered violations far beyond what even we had documented. 3 executives were indicted for criminal negligence. Woodland Manufacturing was placed under state supervision, its leadership removed. Kent faced multiple criminal charges, not just for his treatment of employees, but for knowingly allowing defective safety equipment to be installed in critical facilities. The story spread nationwide. Other workers at similar companies came forward with their own accounts of safety violations and retribution. Regulatory agencies launched investigations into industry-wide practices. For us, the aftermath brought both vindication and healing. Penny's identity theft charges were dismissed with prejudice. Theo was released, the manufacturing charges exposed as fabrication. Former employees were offered reinstatement with back pay and damages. 1 month after the conference, I met Penny at a small cafe downtown. The same cafe where I'd once feared being seen with her, now the site of our victory celebration. Have you heard? She asked as I sat down. The state legislature is drafting new whistleblower protections. They're calling it the Woodland Act. I smiled. Appropriate naming. Helen called this morning, Penny continued. She's been appointed to head a new division focusing on industrial safety compliance. She's offering positions to those of us who helped expose Woodland. Are you going to accept? Penny nodded. Drake starts college next month. Full scholarship. Turns out exposing corporate corruption makes for a compelling admissions essay. We laughed. The sound, light and unfamiliar after months of tension and fear. What about you? She asked. Any regrets? I considered the question. The risks we'd taken. The fear we'd lived with. The system we'd challenged. Not one, I answered truthfully. We didn't just get justice for ourselves. We prevented more people from being hurt. As we sat there, I realized something profound had shifted, not just in the regulatory landscape or in corporate accountability, but in me. Grandma Rose had taught me to stand up for what's right, but I'd never truly understood the cost or the power of that stance until now. Kent had weaponized the very systems meant to protect people, employment, healthcare, law enforcement. He'd calculated that most people would accept injustice rather than risk everything fighting it. His one miscalculation? He hurt someone who refused to stay invisible. I looked at Penny across the table, her face no longer drawn with fear but alight with purpose. We should document what happened, I suggested, how a group of ordinary people stood up to corporate power and won. Others might need the blueprint. I think that's an excellent idea, she agreed. People need to know they're not powerless. And that's why I'm sharing this story now, not just as a record of what happened that scorching summer, but as a reminder that systems of power depend on our silence and isolation to continue unchecked. Sometimes justice requires more than filing complaints or following procedures. Sometimes it requires creativity, courage, and the willingness to make the invisible suffering visible to those who can stop it. If you're facing your own Kent Alvarez, someone abusing power while counting on your silence, remember our story. Find your allies, gather your evidence, and create your moment when the truth can't be ignored. Because in the end, that's how change happens. Not all at once, but person by person, standing up and saying, "This stops now." If our story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about your own experiences standing up to workplace injustice, and subscribe for more real stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary courage. Because the most important lesson we learned, we were never actually powerless. We just needed to discover our power together.